Hello there beautiful, welcome back to my channel. My name is Joesephyr and welcome to another Should You Pull video for Dissidia Final Fantasy Opera Omnia. Now in today's video we're going to be discussing Rude's Lost Chapter, in which Rude is very much not the signature character of the banner, but we get Yuffie's LD instead. And we're going to talk about the event as well, which is quite honestly one of the easier ones that we've had looking through various clears, but we'll talk about what the mechanics and stuff for that are as well. So if you're interested in learning about Rude himself, Yuffie and her new LD and rework, and the event as much as like would you pull and should you pull, etc., then of course as always stay tuned and keep on watching. Of course, as always, don't forget to check out all of my social links in the description box below, including Twitter, Twitch, Discord, and Patreon. Over on Twitch, I do stream 5 times a week, where I stream everything Final Fantasy Opera Omnia related, as well as Final Fantasy XIV and my Final Fantasy count up, amongst other various things that we're all doing. Now, I have actually just released a Final Fantasy XIV video that I would really love if you guys, particularly those who are newer to the game and maybe want to find out some new stuff about it. I've just posted a video of, containing all sorts of things that I wish I'd known when I'd first started playing FF14. So I hope it contains some valuable information. I'd really love for you guys to go and watch that video and support my channel in stuff that's outside of Dissidia Opera Omnia as well as the game itself. Now over on Patreon, I do always shout out one of my patrons every time I release a brand new video, and today that person is going to be Martin Sittic, who has been on my streams supporting me for a very long time and has been on my Patreon for a while as well. So a massive thank you goes out to you and to all of my patrons for supporting my channel, because without you I wouldn't be able to make these videos at the frequency at which I do. Now, if you'd like a title card, just like Martin Sittic has here for Gold Bears, made for you, made just for you by me, as well as lots of other benefits like voice chats that we all do, being a part of Would You Pull, being a part of link shells that I'm bringing into FF14 as well, all sorts of nice things like that perhaps you'd like to consider joining up on Patreon as well. Also, don't forget to check out all the other content creators for Dissidia Final Fantasy Opera Omnia and all of the resources pertaining to the game as well. So first things first, let's talk about the banner itself, what's on it, and then we're going to cover Rude and what he gets out of this banner, and then we're going to talk about Yuffie. So the banner itself will be another chance to get Yuna's BT if you didn't get it during Agrius or Yuna's own banners, and then it'll also contain full kits for Yuffie and Rude, and it'll also contain Lan and Rain's EX. Now, poor old Lan and Rain haven't had a lot of love since their debut, but they do get there eventually. I wouldn't say go pulling for their EX here, but eventually they do get really good. So Rude was really, really powerful when he first came out due to his Shrewd Enforcer buff, which made it so that whenever you had Brave recovery or HP recovery over the top of your max HP, any that would be converted into Bravery through various different means, like there's lots of characters that do that, when they overheal HP it gets converted to Bravery instead. Rude would multiply it by 500%, meaning that your healing and your bravery recovery kind of tied in together. But he was really good when he came out for that, really good, and he was used a lot in a lot of Lufenias. Now he's come back and he has his LD board and his level 80 with his LD call and obviously high armor, and he kind of stayed exactly the same, which isn't great for a character sort of 8-9 months later. So he gets more hits on his combination arts, which is his LD attack. Still only 1 HP dump though, where it's spread across the board. He also gets some added effect to his Shrewd Enforcer buff, which gives him more max bravery and more brave and HP damage dealt while he's got 100% HP or overheal. And he gives some party brave overflow limit. It's not a lot, to be honest. I was kind of hoping to see some more attack buffs, some more auras, things like that, because quite frankly, with the amount of battery that healers like Porum, Yuna, etc. provide, Rude's niche kind of isn't there anymore. So he needed to bring a lot more to the table than he currently does. Yes, the buff and the overflow HP into bravery is really nice, but his attacks, all of his attacks heal, which is nice. He's not unusable, absolutely not. Very few characters in this game are. But it is a shame to see quite how little he got from his LD board. He does, however, get an LD call ability, and his regular call ability is a healing one, and his LD call ability does actually do a large heal and also grants the party the extra HP overflow into bravery by 500% as well. Now, it's not a call that you're probably going to take to everything, because like I said, if you're using HP recovery to that extent, you're probably using a character that uses a lot of bravery battery at the same time, like Aerith, Yuna, Agrius. There's lots of characters that do that kind of thing now, but it is nice to know that you're able to keep hold of Bravery after you've done an HP attack that HP heals, because it's an extra version of Brave Refund that's a little bit different. Are you going to be bringing this to a lot of things? Probably not. Are you going to be bringing Rude to a lot of things past this point? Probably not. Okay, so now let's take a look at Yuffie, who is the star of the show in this banner, having a rework and a new LD. So if you've not used Yuffie before, many people have, because she's been in the game for a very, very long time now. Her main niche was reflecting debuffs back at the enemy, so you'd be able to go, I don't want this, literally, and take this away from herself to give to the enemy. So if the enemy, like Dullahan, back before we got the Abyss version where you had to use it properly, you could reflect his massive HP poison so that he drained all his own HP because of Yuffie. And that is still a really nice niche to have around, but the rest of her kit was very lackluster. But now her rework does actually elevate her quite a lot. So her Mine Now attack now gives reduces enemy bravery by 90% instead of 50 before doing a double HP dumping attack that does a little bit of splash damage, not a huge amount, but it also steals 2 buffs and then extends their duration. So she's got a little bit of Balthea going on. She always stole a buff at random, and now she steals 2 and extends their duration by a turn. But then her I Don't Need This, which is the attack that you use to reflect debuffs back at the enemy, now does 8 debuffs, all not very large, all not framed, but this will come into play with her LD when we get to that as well. She inflicts 8 debuffs to all enemies for 3 turns, which can be extended as well through her LD, and also cleanses a debuff from her allies as well to then reflect back at the enemy, while doing a decent 4-hit Brave HP split damage attack. So this is a large amount of debuffs, so you have to be very careful using this if you're using other characters that have really important non-framed debuffs. For example, Setzer's freeze attack, or Arciela, Kefka, and their HP silence. Now obviously Kefka can frame his, but Arciela can't. So you have to be very careful because there are only 8 slots, and the irony is that with her EX and her LD, Yuffie actually inflicts more debuffs than there's actually room for. So you do have to be careful, but none of the debuffs that she inflicts that are unframed are that big a deal if they get removed. So like physical attack down, magic attack down 20%, initial brave down, max brave down, attack down, defense down, and then lastly poison. So if you end up removing a couple of these, it's not the end of the world because you're going to have to when it comes to her EX and her LD. Now her EX was actually very good as well because while it didn't do a huge amount of damage, it did inflict the no cheating debuff, which made it so that the enemies couldn't gain bravery through effects and they can't gain buffs. So this is kind of like the weird intersection that Yuffie has between like Aerith and Tidus, where she does lots of the techie parts of both of them, but not the actual support or damage part of either of them. But she is like more than the sum of her parts, and she does do a lot in terms of tech play. So the no cheating buff is there from her EX as well. Now, Doom of the Living is a really cool attack for a start. So it inflicts a debuff to the enemies, which makes it so like a singular framed debuff that lowers their attack, their defense, and their speed, and gives them a sap effect as well. But this scales for every other debuff, or for every debuff including yourself, that the enemy has. If you have 8 debuffs on the enemy, so like you're going to have lots of debuffs on the enemy, even if you are using her with other framed debuff like related characters, you're gonna get a lot of stat downs on the enemy just through Doom of the Living, because it can go to 40% attack down, defense down, 24% speed down, and 24% sap, which doesn't sound like a lot. Well, it's a decent amount, but it's all in one debuff, and it means that it's all consolidated into one place, so that other debuffs that are similar can stack on top of it. Not only that, but you also get a framed buff as well, which extends any debuffs that she does by 2 turns, so that was what I was mentioning with the other one as well. It also makes it so that her bravery and HP damage go up to a maximum of 40%, which is a lot for every debuff on the enemy, and also increases party bravery by 10% per damage dealt. So she does a little bit of battery as well, which is kind of nice. She also gets a free skill use after she uses this, and she also dispels a buff from all targets as well. So with Yuffie, the thing is that she doesn't do huge amounts of damage. She has got multi-HP dumps a little bit, like with her LD and her skill 1 now, but her skill 2 and her EX don't have multi-HP dumps. So her HP damage like potential is quite limited compared to a lot of other characters. And the fact that she does debuffs can be sort of done differently with other characters like Kefka or Tidus, who obviously do more damage than she does. But the fact that she kind of covers, you know, debuffing the enemy, cleansing debuffs from yourself in order to reflect them back at the enemies. You've got dispel access as well. You've got a lot of different things that she brings to the table in order to then like reflect them back at the enemy and be able to just keep hold of your party for a long period of time whilst just augmenting your party's damage, even though her damage herself isn't the greatest. I think she's in a weird place because she does have this weird intersection of being a support character and a damage dealer, but she doesn't really do like the core parts of either. Like she doesn't battery very much. She does have some battery with her skill 2 and obviously with her like LD buff as well. She has some battery. She doesn't heal though. So if you're going to take somebody that does like no buffs and you know, not being able to be debuff or debuff evasion, then like Aerith can cover that as well, whilst also providing auras and healing and HP damage up as well. And then with the debuff section, she does all the debuffs, but she does, like I said, she doesn't do as much damage as the likes of Tidus or Kefka even. And Kefka obviously has different debuffs to her, like HP silence, and he has a burst where she doesn't. So it's a weird one. Like, she is actually very good. She's not a bad character by any means, but if you have a lot of her roles already covered, then I don't feel that you need to have Yuffie to have them all covered at the same time. Now, one thing I will say is that Yuffie's call abilities are actually very interesting because the regular call we've had for a while, but now with like level 80, etc., it dispels 2 buffs from the enemies and sets their bravery to 0 after they've recovered bravery, and then after bravery recovery, and then it, you know, it does a decent amount of damage, but it's a dispel call, which is nice. But Doom of the Living actually inflicts Doom of the Living on the enemies. Now, Doom of the Living is a really strong debuff, as we talked about, and it combines very well with her other skills. So it just works in conjunction with characters like Tidus and characters that debuff really heavily, or even if your party just does 2 or 3 debuffs by themselves, then you can get a lot out of this, and it's actually a very potent LD call if you have access to it. Going into their high armors, they actually have very similar in terms of high armor plus. Yuffie has the tactics keystone, which pairs up very well with what she already does, but she also has party-wide damage caps on her HA plus. Now, I wouldn't give this to her on the back of the fact that I feel that Yuffie is a character that excels in her niche. That is not a character you're going to take all the time. Yes, her debuffs are very potent, but her damage does kind of leave something to be desired, and she's probably just not the first character that people are going to jump to for a lot of content. She might be, for some people. Like, she is very good at what she does, so don't get me wrong. But I personally wouldn't give her HA plus on the back of the fact that I'd rather save them for someone who is more widespread in their use. So it gives 5% bravery damage to a cap to the party and 15% brave damage held to the party. So it is a good one. It, you know, if you are going to use it on Yuffie, you know, just be sure that you use her a lot, because it is quite a good one. And then Rude has support keystone on his armor, and then has exactly the same brave damage limits on his high armor plus as Yuffie does. But quite frankly, you're probably not going to give this to Rude on the back of the fact that Rude just isn't very good anymore. So now let's talk about the event that comes along with Yuffie and Rude, which is obviously the Masked Monks that we saw back from Rude's first time around. And this time around, it's a lot easier than it was back then due to the sorts of characters that we have access to now and the kinds of things that we're able to do within fights. So the Lufenia Orb in this asks for poison and sap damage, and it increases the count by 10%, starting at about 80% and then having to be dealt with the entire fight. So it wants you to let the enemies act. And the gimmick with the Masked Monks themselves is every time they act, they level up their masks from white to yellow to red, and then their stats increase, well, depending on what mask they're wearing, and they get bravery like gains, HP regen if they're in like yellow or red masks. If they're in red masks, their attacks are a lot stronger. They do some nasty things, but the way you level them back down again is by breaking them. So for obvious reasons, any enemy or any character you take that has re-break in their kit, such as Strago or Cloud of Darkness, is going to do very well here, provided you can manage like letting them have turns for their orb to tick up. So you want to make sure you're taking some form of sap or poison. This can be anything. Like, it doesn't even necessarily have to be in your main party. You can take cool abilities that do it, like Faris or Shantotto, or like just literally anyone. It's like Sephiroth. There's loads and loads of ways in which you can do lots of sap or anything like that. But honestly, I've seen many clears for this where they don't even let the orb tick down. They just go all in with like damage, and the orb you just ignore it, basically. But the other gimmick that they have as well is after a certain HP threshold, so 80%, 50%, and then 30%, they put shields up and they inflict a debuff on your party called Curse, which is a increased brave and HP damage taken, and also stops you from gaining bravery. So this is something you have to get rid of one way or another, because otherwise you just can't do anything. And the gimmick obviously plays into what Yuffie does, and she wants to throw the curse back at the enemy so that they're then the guys that are worrying about it. But you can take Yuna, like she's synergy, because she's still her batch and she can Asuna it off. Or you can take someone like Ignis or Aerith with debuff evasion so that you don't ever have to worry about it at all. And that works perfectly fine as well. Just make sure that you're carrying some form of sap or poison, whether it be in your calls. If you're taking sap or poison within your calls, you can also take re-breaking calls like your Cloud of Darkness and your Strago, in case their masks level up too far and you want to get them down quickly. You can do that. Sephiroth Burst can work here as long as you're breaking things in the correct order so that you don't push them too far away so their orb ticks down all the way. It's actually really quite a simple fight as long as you've got the correct characters for it. If you're worried about the shield, or you're worried about like them gaining bravery and dealing damage to you, Setzer is going to work here as much as he works in literally anything else. There's lots of characters that you could take. I quite like Sephiroth in this fight because the debuff, it increases their bravery damage taken, and it kind of covers the sap, and his BT effect works well. I really like Sephiroth for this particular fight. There's lots of things that you can do to clear this, though. It's really not as challenging as a lot of fights that we've had in the past. So now we come to the big question of the video: should you be pulling for Yuffie and Rude? Now, I am of the opinion that had Yuna and Agrias been nice to other people, then they could throw some tickets at Yuffie. I think she's actually very good. I think that she's one of the more underrated characters out there because she kind of fulfills multiple niches by herself, in that she does cover, your debuff cleansing, your buff dispelling, the whole reversal thing, and obviously the damage debuffing role in general she does very well at. And the fact that she prevents brave gains as well through her EX and stopping them from buffing themselves, they're not buffing. It's very Aerith styled, but it's more offensively geared, as opposed to Aerith, who is more defensively geared with healing and, more aura-based stuff. So it's very similar for that, but Yuffie does sit in this weird place where she's neither a major damage dealer nor a major support unit. She is exclusively her niche, so her uses one might consider not to be as widespread as some other characters. Rude is honestly a complete disappointment. He didn't get very much from his LD board at all. Yeah, you can use him, he's fine, but he doesn't do anything that stands out anymore amongst the massive plethora of really strong healing battery based support characters that we now have. And obviously with the massive reductions in brave gains and things like that, brave damage, Rude's just not going to be able to keep up by himself, so you need another character to kind of augment him anyway. So it would have been nice if he'd gotten either more damage output, so whether it be an extra HP dump or a follow-up or something like that made his damage stronger, or he got more auras so that he wasn't quite so reliant on those brave gains to make him good, but sadly he didn't really get either of them. And then Yuffie, one thing I will say is both of them have good call abilities. Like, Yuffie's got very good call abilities. Rude's is fine. Like, it's something you could use if you wanted a healing call, and then you had access to something that made the healing more relevant over time. But honestly, after the last two banners being such big ones with Yuna and Agrias, now is the point where people really want to be saving. So up till Divine Pandemonium, because if you can save from now until Divine Pandemonium, you'll be ready, hopefully, with a decent amount of resources, as well as the ones we'll get from Divine Pandemonium for the start of BT Plus era. So if Ishtola, Zidane, Ace, Bartz, Sid Reigns, Aphmau, all of them are really, really good. Zac is another one that's very popular. There's a lot of characters to come out of BT Plus, so honestly, take the skips where you can. If you really like Yuffie, she is good. Like, you will use her. She does a lot, and she does a lot very well. But her damage output is a little bit lackluster. She doesn't carry much in the way of party-based auras, and you can fulfill a lot of what she does with other characters. So, Tidus, Kefka for debuffing, Aerith for her, but like no buffs, no debuffs sort of situation. There are other characters you can use to fulfill most of what Yuffie does. But if you really like that reversal thing that Yuffie does so well, then maybe you do want to chase after her LD, because this definitely elevates her beyond that singular niche. And then finally, of course, it's time for Would You Pull, the section of the video where you, the viewer, get your chance to make your voice heard and let everyone know whether you would or wouldn't pull on any given banner and why that might be the case. So once again, a massive thank you goes out to all of my patrons for their votes and their comments. And if you'd like to see the full database of all of my patrons' comments, then it's all available on my Discord, for those of you who are on my Patreon. So it might be a reason for you to want to click on that link in the description box below as well. So thank you very much for that if you decide to do so. So going into the numbers, 7% of people said that we're going to use gems on this banner, 37% of people said they were going to use 100 or more tickets, 30% that said they were going to use less than 100 tickets, and 27% of people said no. So it's actually quite a varied opinion when it comes to this banner. I think obviously most people here are pulling for Yuffie, if not all of them. If you're pulling at all, you're not pulling for Rude, realistically. He just doesn't do enough to keep up with everybody else. He's fine, but most people probably already have him because so many people pull for him the first time around. So let's go into some of these comments. So Diamond Dragoon says, I'll throw 20 or 30 tickets, but that's it. As good as she may be, the only reason I'd use Yuffie is to throw back enemies' unique debuffs back on them, and I don't need the LD for that. Which is very true. You don't need the LD. For the times in which Yuffie's reversal is really, really powerful, like the Dullahan fight, you didn't even need her EX for that. Like, you don't need her LD. So you could use her, like, switch her out for a friend unit like a Cloud of Darkness or an X-Death when he comes out, and then just do it that way, because you probably won't need to use Yuffie much beyond that point if you're only using her for that debuff reversal. The main draw of her LD is to elevate her beyond that particular niche, and it does add a lot to her kit in that regard. Pale Raider says, I'm going to have to pass on this. Agrias cleared me out with a pity. With one banner still in my eye for this month, I can't afford to simply throw resources about willy-nilly. I already have Rude, and although Yuffie is a brilliant call unit, I only have 3 call slots, and I have more options than I really need. Her ability to cheese at least one future Lufenia, the FF9 Antlion, does not depend on her LD in any way. Sorry, Yuffie, but my gems need a rest. I think that a lot of people, I mean, you guys have seen my pulls. I've pitied plenty this past couple of weeks, or I've dropped nearly 200,000 gems since Setzer, which is not cute. But, like, because of that, a lot of people are in a recovery period, myself included. So while I'd really like Yuffie, I do think she's really good. I think that her roles outside of her reversal, the bit that doesn't require her LD, can be filled with other party members. And I like what's being said here about only having 3 call slots as well, because there are a lot of call slots. There's a lot of cool abilities that are really good, and only 3 slots rather. And like, if you've got Faris, you don't need Yuffie. Like, Faris will perfectly encapsulate that. She mass dispels with her regular call and puts some nasty debuffs with her LD call as well. So, while Yuffie's really good, so's Faris. So if you have Faris, there's even less reason for you to be pulling for Yuffie. Cobalt Zork says Yuffie is just fun. Is she essential to any content? Probably not. Is she easily replaceable? Probably yes. Is she fun to whip out for debuff throwback, buff stealing, debuff stacking shenanigans? Yes. My pulls are guided more by who I think will be fun to use rather than the best powerhouse of the day. Though when the two intersect, Chef's Kiss and Yuffie absolutely fits the bill. She does, yes, absolutely. So for those of you that like Yuffie, she's not going to disappoint you. She's very good. It's just a case of finding the points in time in which one can rest their resources, because you can't pull on everything. And then finally, Wooton says, I'm still hoping for Eunice BT, so I'm going to be putting some of my resources here. Plus, I'm a big FF7 fan. I really like Yuffie's kit, plus I really like her costume. Good luck, everyone, with your pulls. And I didn't touch on the costume. I don't think I've really seen very many people using this costume, though, on JP, to the point where I had to ask if it was a global first costume. Turns out it's not, but I've not seen very many people using it, and it is actually a very nice costume. It's the Advent Children one. So I'm a little sad that it wasn't the FF7 remake one, but when this came out in JP, that intermission hadn't happened yet. But it is what it is. But it is a really nice costume. If you are an FF7 fan and if you like Yuffie, she is going to do well for you. There are a lot of applications in which you can use her. Just be warned that she does come with her drawbacks. So that's going to be all for today's video. Thank you ever so much for joining me, and I hope you enjoyed it. Don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and click the bell for notifications on any future videos I might be making. And leave a comment and let everyone know whether you're going to be pulling on Yuffie or Rude, or if you're saving for BT Plus era, or if you're saving for X-Death. You know, maybe you're saving up for him. Let us all know. And of course, don't forget to check out the FF14 video that I posted yesterday as well, as I would really love it if people watch that. I'd really like feedback on that video, things I could do to improve on it, because I'm still quite new when it comes to doing content on FF14 and I want to improve it the best way I can. So thank you all very much for watching, and I will see you next time. Take care, everyone.